Hi, my name's Kara-Leah from the Yoga Lunchbox, and today I am here with Asha, as she likes to be known. Asha has been meditating for over 40 years. She is sharing the teachings of Yogananda, and some of you may be familiar with Yogananda. He is the author, or was the author, is the author of Autobiography of a Yogi. And Asha is also one of the founders of Ananda, and she is coming to New Zealand in September, going on tour for about 4 or 5 weeks. So I'm very privileged to have this opportunity to speak to her. So welcome, Asha.
Thank you, Kara-Leah. I'm very happy to be talking to you.
So you've been meditating for about 40 years, and you don't look that old, so I'm guessing you must have started quite young.
I was 22 when I met Swami Kriyananda, who is a direct disciple of Yogananda, and it was really that's the point at which I became serious. I was introduced a few years earlier to the basic ideas, but I really became focused at the age of 22.
So I imagine back then that it would have been somewhat unusual to choose this path?
Well, America was breaking open in the hippie movement, and I was right out there in the forefront in my long skirts and my long hair and our unorthodox lifestyle.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it was all just part of the scene at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Indian teachings were coming in, and so it was unorthodox, but we were kind of a crowd of revolutionaries at that moment.
Must have been pretty amazing to be there when that was happening. What did your parents say when you said, look, I've met this Swami and I'm just going to follow him and start meditating every day?
Well, they kind of thought it was a phase that I would grow out of, so they took it pretty lightly. As I aged and stuck with it, they kind of alternated. Sometimes they supported it, sometimes they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But toward the end of their lives, their past now, both of them fully admitted that I was clearly a very happy person. And therefore, whatever choices I'd made seemed to have been the best ones for me. I was grateful. They didn't really get it, but they saw the fruits and they loved me enough to just appreciate it at that point.
So what does it mean when you follow, so Swami Kriyananda, did I say that correctly? That you're a disciple of him and he was a disciple of Yogananda. What does it mean to become a disciple of someone like Swami Kriyananda?
Oh, that's a very good question. It's sort of like asking, what does it mean to marry someone? I don't mean it in the same sense because it's not that kind of a relationship. But there's many possible partners for a person in the world, but then you just feel some somewhat inexplicable attunement with certain ones for many, many reasons that are hard to comprehend. And human relationships actually mirror divine relationships. So the friendship that you have with a spiritual teacher has that element of mystery to it. There are many spiritual teachers, many of them are extremely valid, but you just find ones that belong to you. Something about the vibration really resonates. And that's exactly what happened to me.
So what are the core teachings that you work with? If you could sum them up, and maybe, are there like 2 or 3 or 4 core teachings? Or?
Yeah, it's very simple, really. The first concept is that we are all part of a greater reality. People use the English word God for that reality, but that's not a very good word in English because it doesn't have a lot of meaning unless you have some dogma attached to it. There's a word in Sanskrit which is Satchitananda, which means ever-existing, ever-conscious, ever-new bliss. So that's the definition of the greater reality that we're all part of, is this eternal bliss. And every aspect of creation is equally a part of that. Our opportunity in life is to become more and more aware of that. And all true spiritual paths, whatever rituals or dogmas or whatever they teach, all true paths really are an ever-expanding awareness of the bliss of our own nature. And our particular path has aspects like we meditate, we do a practice called Kriya Yoga. We're dedicated to this particular spiritual family and the way it expresses itself, which includes intentional communities, and isn't just for monks and nuns. It's for married people and families and children, and we have about 9 communities around the world where people of all walks of life live together and live a very practical spiritual life, a very integrated spiritual life, where we're part of the world around us, but the support of like-minded friends just makes all the difference.
So how big are some of those communities? I mean, are you talking, like what size are they? Are sort of self-contained villages, or are they smaller, or?
Well, our main community, our first and oldest community, which was started in 1968, I came in 1971. It's now 1,000 acres of land and about 300 people.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been there 40 years, so we're the children of the pioneers are having their babies. Not everybody stays there by any means, but we're up to a third generation. But for the last 25 years, I've lived in an urban area. That community's out in the country. I live in Palo Alto, the Silicon Valley area where Apple Computer and Google and Facebook and all those companies are situated. And we have an urban community here. And so here we have an apartment complex. And there's about 80 of us who live together in this apartment complex. And here we have a teaching center. And we run a school for children, and we have a bookstore. So it's really, literally, physically integrated with the world around. And a lot of the people who live here just work in all the careers that people would follow. But we come back and have a shared living, shared idealism together.
So it's a real way of having a householder experience, isn't it, while you're still embedded in a spiritual life?
Exactly. I myself am married. I've been married for 30 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
I met my husband when I was living at Ananda Village. He showed up one day, and that was that. We've been together ever since, doing this together.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really been a key and happy part of it, that relationships, we've never had children, but we're godparents to quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the whole part, everything about life is made spiritual. It's a much more natural way to live.
Mm. So you're coming to New Zealand in September. What prompted this? Is this part of a world tour, or is it New Zealand particularly, or?
The answer is both, mm-hmm. although this is a California, New Zealand, California trip.
Mm-hmm.
A few years ago, Swami Kriyananda, he passed away a year and a half ago, but in the last year of his life, he suggested to me that instead of thinking so much geographically, that there's one community that I've been responsible for with my husband, he suggested I consider the whole planet to be my community, so to speak, which I'd had that sentiment, but not practically. And he really asked me, as he put it, to become a global ambassador for Ananda. Mm-hmm. So it's been about 2 years since he asked that, and I've tootled a good bit around the U.S. I've been to India a few times. I've been to Europe. I only speak English. In New Zealanders speak English, and I prefer not to be translated. I wish I could make it more mystical than that. But it feels to me, and this is part intuition and part just a wing and a prayer, that what Ananda has to offer would be attractive to the people of New Zealand. Mm-hmm. And no one from Ananda has ever visited. And so I thought, I'm bringing 4 of my friends. We just thought, let's just give it a try. Let's just go see, if we have kindred spirits there.
So what does Ananda have to offer?
It has to offer, I think, a very modern form of ancient teaching, mm-hmm. Completely devoid of cultural overlays. It's extremely satisfying to both the heart and the mind. It takes people right where they're standing and gives them an idea of how they can expand their experience of joy from right where they're standing. You don't have to become somebody else. You don't have to learn another language, another culture. It responds, I think, to the sincere longing that everybody shares for greater freedom, greater happiness, a greater sense of inner security, this sense of loneliness and vulnerability, I think, is the plague of our age. And both spiritual practice and the Ananda style of spiritual practice, which is so, I would say, free and natural, mm-hmm. is highly suited for our time. Certainly, my own life has proved that to me. I have had the opportunity to share with many, and it's been a good story. It's worked out well.
I watched one of your YouTube videos, of which there are many, I must note. They've seems like I'm guessing they video all the talks you do now, which is great because they're all on there.
A lot.
You did say in one of them, you gave thanks for the life that you've lived, and you said every day has been wonderful. And then you laughed and said, not always happy, but always wonderful. Yes. And can you explain that a little bit? Because I think that's a really important distinction about living life in this manner, is that things are always not always, but things may be wonderful every day, but they're not always happy. What is that distinction?
Well, I would be not speaking the truth if I told anyone, oh, just follow this path and you'll never have any karma. I mean, it's just everybody has karma. Some karma is exceedingly challenging. That's the nature of this world. But what this spiritual path has given me, and what I was so grateful to find, is like a unifying thread that is always with you. So in the dark and difficult times, you may be struggling, but you're not lost, because you have a feeling about where you've come from and where you're going, and even with enough humility and self-honesty, an understanding of why the difficulty is coming and what the blessing is behind it, and then above all, what route to take, not merely to survive, but actually to be somewhere that you really want to be at the end of it. So for me, even in the hard times, which come to everyone, I've always felt a sense of I'm where I need to be, I'm doing what I need to be doing, and I have the tools to get through. It can still be dark and icky, because much is dark and icky. But it's much worse if you don't have any idea what you're doing.
It seems like when I'm on Facebook, often like every second or third article that pops up is how to be happy, 7 tips to happiness. And it's like there's this great drive. If we could just be happy, everything would be okay. And yet that's not really what you're talking about, is it?
Well, I think it's all about the English word happy, because happy could mean lots of things. Happy can mean pleasurable and easy. Some people think that happy is pleasurable and easy, and I don't think that's really happy. The word Ananda is a Sanskrit word, and it's the name of our communities. It means joy. Define it as happy, but it's the kind of happiness that is not dependent on outward circumstances, that is inwardly generated, that even when you're weeping, is still there. That's Satchidananda. That's the underlying nature. That you can be a fundamentally happy person, meaning a person who knows what they're about and what they're doing, and then still face a lot of karma. You can see people have lots of karma. Now, some of what is talked about is happiness, and it has become a trend. We made a movie about Ananda, and we called it Finding Happiness. We either were at the front of the wave or right in the middle, I'm not sure, because after we finished the whole film, before we named it, we thought it was such a red-hot name, and then we discovered that everyone in the world is using it. Some of that happiness they're talking about is profound, and some of it is superficial. So we just have to discriminate. As I said, the English language doesn't discriminate, so we have to discriminate in our own selves.
Yes, so there's a difference. I mean, happiness can mean many things.
Exactly.
So Swami Kriyananda, he sometimes said that his goal in teaching was to awaken in people their own sense of divine truth.
Exactly.
Do you have a sense of what your goal as a teacher is?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel that I have been fortunate to have been very close to a very powerful spiritual teacher, in Swami Kriyananda. I was not only his devotee, but we were very good friends for 40 years. I know him very well. And again, I learned from him so much of practical value that I feel so many people are hungering for. And this is not just a theory on my part, because I've spent almost all my life talking and just telling people these ideas, and I've seen even the littlest bit of this understanding, of karma, of the chakras, of the nature of life, of how to relate to people, of how to control your own destiny, how to work with your the waves of feeling that come through us. I mean, how to make money, just everything is covered. Just a little bit of that is so helpful to people. And I feel so much kindness and wisdom was showered on me that I have this enormous debt to pay. That's how I feel about it. I have to pass on what I have learned. Plus, I'm wildly enthusiastic as a person. And when I love something, I can't keep it for a minute. I'm just out there. So I'm also just following my own nature.
Mm-hmm.
By, look, this is a good idea. Why don't you think about it? See if it'll help you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me explain it to you. Let me answer your questions if I can.
Mm.
And that's what I do. It's very simple.
So when people come to one of your events in New Zealand, what can they expect? What's going to happen when they show up?
Well, I'm traveling with a good friend who's also a very good singer, and we have a lot of original music that's part of Ananda. So he'll sing. He's a very dear person, and he'll sing, and we'll probably do a little bit of kirtan, a little bit of chanting, and then mostly I'll talk about the announced subject, which I always talk about in a very spontaneous way. I don't come in with a set of notes. I just come in to say who's in the room and what do we need. And so it's very informal, lots of time for question and answer. If it's appropriate to the setting, we'll probably do some meditation. There's 5 of us in our traveling group, and we range in age from 25 to 72. So we'll just be talking to everyone, talking about Ananda, but mostly we'll really be talking about, hello, who are you? Is there anything that we know that might be of help to you? We are to share, to make friends, to get to know each other.
And finally, one last question. When you're here, you're doing a 3-day retreat, and I think it's in Taupo that you're doing this retreat. So what's that like for people, or what could they expect, or who would it be best suited for them to come and immerse themselves for 3 days? What's that?
I think anyone who's looking for deeper meaning in their life. There's no prerequisites. There's no expectation of knowledge or skill. We've mentioned yoga postures, which will be part of it, but it's not central to our practice, although it's enormously beneficial. So don't feel you have to be an accomplished yogi to be part of it, or an accomplished meditator. We'll help you with all of those things. I think if you're a truth seeker, if you would like to take a little time away and immerse yourself in a deeper, more uplifted kind of reality, if you want to have a lot of fun and laugh a lot, and just be lighthearted and like-minded with fellow truth seekers, I think those are all good reasons to come.
Beautiful. Asha, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me and the Yoga Lunchbox audience. I'm sure that many people will gain a lot from coming to your events in September, October, and a little bit in November, right?
Right, yes. And if you go to Ananda, New Zealand, that's where you'll find it on the web.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.